Hi everyone, it's Chris from the Recruiting Analytics channel, and today I'm excited to walk through a really fun topic, uh, essentially trying to answer the question, to what extent can you automate your content marketing strategy and essentially build a fully automated end-to-end process? So I've created a brief walkthrough. We're going to go through that. I'll go into detail on some of the aspects and share the script with you at the end in case you want to try this. This is all built out in Python in a Jupyter notebook. If you're not too familiar with that, hopefully the concepts will still read across and you can kind of get an understanding as to how this would work. But you should feel free to ask any questions, drop them in the comments below. Essentially, by the end of this video, we're going to output a blog post, which should look something like this. This can be copied and pasted and put into your content management system. And you will have a group of LinkedIn posts for a given topic, which should cover you for a week. You can see here, preview, we are going to compare 3.5 with 4. For those not familiar, they're the two different models that are most commonly used with OpenAI right now. So we're going to walk through how I think about the two different models, where we would use them, and essentially how to build your own end-to-end content creation system. So let's dig in. So in my notebook, I've tried to highlight everything that I'm doing as I'm going through, but I'll just walk you through at a very high level. Now, I've already run this notebook just to save a little bit of time, but the whole end-to-end notebook takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes to run. And what it's doing is it's calling the OpenAI server and essentially asking OpenAI to generate different content for us based on what we input. And I can show you how I'm inputting those different areas. It's very similar to how you would run the chat-based interface if you're familiar with ChatGPT, but we're essentially automating a lot of that process and just preloading everything we want to do. So the first step is to actually load in your models. So you can see here, I already have my API key. You're not going to see it because that's personal to me. And then I have these helper functions, which essentially allow me to send a query to OpenAI. What you can see here is there's a role that we add in as we're messaging the system, and we're telling OpenAI how we want that GPT model to act. So here we're telling it's a highly intelligent AI skilled in parsing and summarizing content. And identify main themes and stylistic approaches. This is because we're kind of trying to tune it a little bit to exactly what we want it to do. The other thing that I'm putting in here is something called a temperature. Now, the temperature you can think of as a degree of randomness. So a temperature of 0 means you should get pretty much the same response every time you ask a question. A temperature of 1 is the most random response that you could potentially generate. We're using the 0.8 here, no other reason than I think it should generate some interesting content. And you can see that I have 2 different functions here. The first one is querying GPT-4o, which is the latest GPT model that's available. It's less expensive than the previous GPT-4 model. It allows you to send a lot of data to it. And the responses are pretty good, and I'm going to show you the difference later. What I use for most of my development still is GPT 3.5 Turbo. It's actually much more cost effective. It costs, cents to do kind of huge model development work. But I tested this final iteration using 4.0, and you'll be able to see how much better the results are when we cover that at the end. So here's an example prompt. So once we've got the models all lined up, I essentially just want to test to make sure that everything's working. So you can see we've said, hey, there's 5 ways that AI can help with content creation. These are the 5 things that GPT came up with. So let's get into the meaty stuff. So how are we going to create our content? So what I tried to do is follow the type of content creation process that I would normally follow if I was creating something from the ground up. So it starts with getting some source text or some source ideas. Generally, what I would do is do my own research, create a research document, and then actually create content based off that research that I've done. And I very rarely use AI sometimes to help. But this experiment is really to see, to what extent if we fed in some source documents, could we actually generate some original content given how the model works. So what I'm using here, ironically, is a prompting guide that came out from Google. So I'm saying, okay, let's take this Google prompting guide. It's pretty long guide. I think it's around 40 pages. And let's see if we can actually generate some content based on that guide to actually help people write their own prompts. So all I'm doing here is loading that guide in. we actually have our own little helper functions that you will have access if you want to get access to the GitHub repo that I'm going to link. But all we're doing is reading this in and making sure that our functions can access the data that's stored in this PDF. So we've stored that in, and now what we want to do is summarize the source text, because what we don't want to do is send these 40 pages through to our OpenAI model every time we're trying to generate something. So what I try and do initially is summarize what I'm reading, and I would do this manually as well. If I'm reading the text, I'll take notes, I'll make bullet points, and that's going to help me to kind of like break down concepts so that I can build them back up and actually combine them with different ideas. And that's essentially what we're trying to recreate here. So we're breaking down this concept, and you can see here it's creating the kind of different ideas that are embedded within this 40-page document, and really just summarizing it into different sections for me. And this is going to be helpful when I want to then write my blog post. So step 3 is the outline of the blog post. This could be a newsletter article, or however you're building your content strategy, you essentially want to start with some kind of long form piece. And so what we're doing here is summarizing the content and using that to create something from the ground up. The way that I want to kind of build this blog post is there's 2 things that I want to give the GPT model. Firstly, I want to have a point of view. So let's assume that I've read the source document and I've developed my own point of view, and there's an argument I want to make, and this blog post should be able to make that argument. The second thing is we actually want to make sure that we have good SEO keywords. If we're going to write a blog post, even if it's AI generated, we really want it to appear in the Google search results. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of including that up front. So as I'm creating this blog outline prompt, and this is all very basic Python code, what you can see is the red text is the prompt. This is what I'm writing and telling GPT to kind of use this to query its models and come back with the completion that I'm asking it to. But what I'm injecting here is my point of view, the SEO keywords, and the summary. So these things I can change every time without having to change the outline prompt. So if you imagine this becoming part of a weekly routine, what you could essentially do is each week you come up with a different topic, you give it different source material, and you could have multiple different source materials. Come up with a point of view, come up with some SEO keywords, and actually use that to write the outline of a blog. Now, we're not going to go into this. It's a little complicated to read. This is in what's called Markdown language, but we're going to convert that later so that we can actually read it more effectively. So we have our outline of our blog post. The next thing we want to do is, this is where my experience comes in, is actually create content for LinkedIn. So let's say we want to do a series of posts. We want to create a post about this content every day of the week. So we want 7 pieces, want them to be different content pieces. And this was inspired by some of the content that Justin Welsh creates. I've taken many of his courses. I would highly recommend them if you're new to writing online or if you just want to create a structure. But this is in the same kind of style that he would recommend. So you're going to create 7 different pieces on this topic, and then we're going to create an output so that we can post these to LinkedIn. So again, the prompts here, you can look through it in your own time, but the outline for the prompt is being fed from this previous section. So you can see there's this kind of chain now that we're following, where we've taken our initial idea, our initial concept. We have created a summary based on it. We then wrote a blog post. Now we're going to create LinkedIn content based on that blog post. So we're setting up the model to be able to understand what we want, and then we're going to print out some LinkedIn content. So here again, it's in Markdown language. So it's a little complicated to read, but we're going to jump ahead shortly, and you can see how the content is mapped here. So what we're doing here is just creating high-level content and saying, hey, listen, based on what we've read, these are the kind of themes that we would like for these 7 different types of content. Step 5, we're actually going to finally draft the content. Again, this is following the process that I would normally follow if I'm writing content from some source documents. So we're going to set up some parameters. So we have our 7 different types. So these are the types of content that we're going to create. We're going to create a writing prompt so that we can give the model the same prompt every time, but something's going to change with each one so that we don't generate 7 pieces of identical content. And all we're doing here is giving the outline that we just created. So you can see what we're doing is we're taking large amounts of content, we're shrinking it down, and then we're expanding it again. So it's this constant kind of digest of ideas and then expansion of ideas that hopefully will create something that's a little bit more original, but actually give us more control in the direction that we're taking, rather than just using ChatGPT to say, hey, write me a blog post on how to use prompt engineering. So we've gone through that process. Now this is a little more Pythonic, but again, it's not, hopefully not too complicated. So what we're doing here is we're creating this structure of different content. What we essentially want to do is create a spreadsheet table which has some content in each of the cells in the 7 different areas. So we can essentially just copy and paste. And you can imagine over time, you have, each week you have your list of cells and you have the content that's kind of built within there. And so all we're doing here is cycling through this list that we created, so the 7 different types of content. And every time we cycle through one of those pieces, we're going to have ChatGPT write a piece of content related to that area, to that topic. Go through a little bit more. It's called data munging, where we're actually trying to structure it in the right way. And finally, we get this output. And you can see here, this is a preview of the 7 different types of content, and then the actual content is in this cell here. It's not really very usable in the notebook, but what I really like to do is then export it into a usable format. And so we'll export it into a HTML file for the blog post. That means that we can quite easily copy and paste into a content management system, or even just publish the HTML live. It's going to look pretty terrible, but the kind of concept is there. Or we might want to save it as a CSV file and actually create this spreadsheet of all the different content and kind of post one every day. And so that's how we would do that in this section. So that's pretty much it. There's 6 stages that we go through. In 2 to 3 minutes, you can have the whole end-to-end script completed. All you're going to do is go in and change things on a weekly basis and kind of create this LinkedIn content. So is this a viable strategy? Well, I think the models that we see are getting more mature over time. What I've noticed is if you go on LinkedIn, I'll read certain blog posts, there's certain elements that you can see that which really make a piece of content stand out as being AI generated. And so there's kind of like a lot of superlatives in the way that GPT, especially 3.5, writes. So it has a lot of similarities. All this is doing really is reconstructing the initial source document that we can put in. I'd say to some degree it's potentially plagiarization, but it kind of works. If you want to make something that is going to you want to churn out SEO content, this is probably the right way to do it. And you can see the same with the LinkedIn content. What makes me laugh is whenever I read something on LinkedIn and it starts with something like, in today's digital age, or in today's fast-paced digital landscape, you know that was written by AI, specifically GPT 3.5, and it's very obvious. And I don't think the content is that great, but it's content, and so if you're just trying to churn stuff out, then maybe this is good enough. I think where it changes a little bit is when we look at what is possible with the GPT 4.0 model. So this is the same prompt, everything was the same, but instead of using the 3.5 model, I'm using the latest version of the model. So what we're seeing here is a blog post that actually creates some kind of a little bit more structure. It's actually breaking down the components of a prompt. It's giving you practical tips and use cases and steps. It's kind of giving you like everything that you need to create a useful blog post. Now the source content's the same, the prompt's the same, but the actual model is a little bit different. Again, I would think you're losing some creativity here. All we're doing is kind of rehashing work that's already been done and styles that have already been used in the past. And a lot of the time, that's kind of good enough. I do think that original content creators and those that are kind of like leading on innovation and actually have a more journalistic approach won't be replaced by this kind of SEO blog post generation. But you can see how this could be used to even create a first draft of potential content and just kind of speed that initial ideation along. Let's have a look at the LinkedIn content and compare that. Notice that most of this 3.5 content looks the same. The first sentence or two are very similar. Here, we're actually looking at something that's kind of a little different. But again, you've seen similarities. Are you looking to get the best results from AI? Are you looking to maximize your productivity with AI? looking to enhance your AI interactions. So, there's this kind of proposition at the start of the post, and it's going into more like step by steps and giving examples. So again, and this is feeding from the blog post. So you can see how if you maybe created different styles of blog posts, the content may be different. So I still think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think the content creation uh, opportunity is definitely there. But I won't be using this to kind of create original content anytime in the future. Maybe use it to kind of create a first draft, or maybe to think about different ideas based on content I've already written. But there you go. I hope you found this helpful. If you want to see more content like this, drop a note in the comments below, hit subscribe, or check out one of the other videos. They'll be posted on screen right about now. But would love to hear your thoughts, and please hope you enjoy everything else. Take care.